Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dynasty Junkies. We are on episode 77 of the Dynasty Junkies this week. Oh, man, it doesn't feel like we've gone through a whole year, but yet it feels like last week was an entire year in itself. We are here week 16 of the NFL season. Excited to finally be through some of the playoffs. I've got my co-host for the evening tonight, Rocky Petrella. How's it going, Rocky? How you feeling tonight?
Going great. This is kind of fun these last couple weeks, switching up the format a little. We had Scott host last week, who doesn't usually host, and usually when I'm on, I take the lead. But I'm just going to relax and let you guide the show, Andrew. I'm enjoying this.
No pressure. I like it. That's the way to do it. Well, hopefully we're going to have some good conversation tonight. We got a great guest on tonight. We got Jay Feliciano. Am I saying that right, Jay?
Not even close, but that's okay. I'm used to it. Felicio.
I was close, but not close. I appreciate that,
Right.
Jay. Welcome to the show, Jay. Glad to have
Thank
you on. And
hey, trust me.
Hey,
Last name like that, I've heard much worse than that. So you are perfectly fine. No worries.
I hosted a DGN episode where I called Shane Barrett Scott for the first 20 minutes, as you know.
I was
Andrew.
on that episode.
Yes,
that was great.
So,
that was great.
I've done that to him many times. So.
Yes.
All good, all good. Well, again, glad you're here, Jay. We're going to get into some of the talks tonight. We're going to have some fun, see what we can get into. I know a lot of times on this show we get into some of the injuries, but this week we're pretty much skipping that, partially because there's a whole bunch of games. Every day it feels like there's games on every single day. There's new COVID additions. There's new players coming off IR, going on IR. Listen, it's just too much to keep up with. And at this time of year, all we care about is championships. All we care about is winning that title. So, let's get right to it. Let's cut through all the noise of the injuries. There isn't a whole lot of really big dynasty relevant news. I mean, yes, some of the injuries could have some dynasty relevance, but for the most part, we're not really too worried about it. So we're going to jump right into, I think, was a terrific idea for this episode. And we're going to just pretty much do listener questions all night. We're going to pull some questions that we got off of Twitter, people that saw my tweet about that. We're going to dive into some of these. Some of them might be easy. Some of them might be hard. Some of them might cause a lot of discussion. Some of them might not cause any discussion. We'll see kind of where it goes. But I think that way it's a little more free flowing. We can kind of give some opinions and valuations on things. And again, I think it just makes it for an easier end of the year as we're all kind of wrapping up. We got holidays. Everybody's all over the place. I'm at my in-laws, so this is a fun little change of pace for me too. So with that said, I guess the first question I put on the sheet, which I think is a great one to kind of dive into this, it's from Pulsar, and I think we've done a league of his. I think we'd found him a trade once at Pulsar0102. He asked, what is your offseason process in terms of timing from right after the Dynasty Championship in your league through free agency, the draft, and preseason to the start of next season? So really what he's asking here is kind of like, what is your thought process as one season ends before the next season begins? As Russ likes to call it, the non-point scoring season, right? And I love the non-point scoring season. That's my favorite time of year. But Rocky, we'll kick it over to you first. I guess broad strokes, big picture. What is your thought process when the season ends? How do you plan for next year?
First of all, when the season first ends, I take a break. I like to wind down after. It's such a grind. It's especially I have 33 leagues, setting lineups every week and doing waivers every week and all that stuff. I usually take probably about maybe 3 weeks off. I mean, if I get trade offers, I'm not ignoring them, but and then after that, what I've started doing the last year or so is I'm trying to get more into watching the rookies myself, because once the season ends, rookie season begins, and I like getting my own eyes on them. Like back 3-4 years ago when I first started, I do what Russ often says. I was depending on other people to tell me who was good, basically. So I like getting in there and seeing these guys. I get stronger opinions on them. That's why I firmly still believe that Zach Wilson is total trash, because I did watch college tape on him, and so yeah, a lot of the time early on is spent doing that. I don't get. I would say during the off season, I don't get as active sending out trade offers and things like that. But being in as many leagues as I am, I get plenty, so I still get my itch in, get my action in. I'll counter, or I'll come up with something else when someone sends me something. In terms of free agency, I don't have that much effect on me on Dynasty. I'll do the thing that everybody's going to do. Certain guys get bumps based on where they sign or who leaves with their team and things like that. So of course I'm sending out offers then. But yeah, the big thing for me is preparing for the rookie drafts. And also another big thing I like to do early in the off season is try and reacquire some rookie picks, especially like right after that break in January, before people start really getting hyped up, because I'm the kind of guy who will, at this point in the year, I have so many rosters where I have like no picks because I'm going for it. I have a lot of playoff teams, and I'm trying to bolster my lineups, especially this friggin' year where everybody's disappearing on you in the blink of an eye thanks to COVID. So acquiring picks early, looking at guys for the rookie draft, and as we always say, in the offseason, it's all about value. So don't be worrying about your starting lineup until about August. Don't be worried about when you get those trade offers or when you're making them. Just don't worry about the lineup.
No, I 100% agree. And I think you're hitting on a couple of the things I want to mention too, but I'll let Jay go next and kind of see maybe if he's on the same page as he have any other things that he plays. I guess, Jay, what is that sort of the same as Rocky? You playing the long game, or are you looking for something else in the offseason?
Yeah, so I don't want to rehash everything that he said, but a lot of the same. I definitely take a break. I am in way too many leagues, over 20. I think, Rocky, you and I talked about this a few weeks ago. I am in too many. Scott Fish tweeted out, I think a day or two ago, about he thinks a lot of people are going to cut back on leagues next year because, with COVID 2020 and 2021, everybody joined a ton of leagues, and I am very guilty of that. So just make sure, in my personal opinion, when you leave a league, do it the right way. Give plenty of notice. Don't just trade away your picks and be like, oh, sorry, I'm out. But
and one other thing I just wanted to add to that, don't worry about leaving leagues either. I'm a commissioner, 7 leagues. And 99% of commissioners don't care. Like, they're just like, let me know and I'll find somebody else. They don't care what your reason is. I honestly don't. Like, if you want to leave, I'm okay.
Right.
I mean,
and
if you're in one of my leagues, I like Jay. I'm like, I wish you wouldn't leave, but I'm not like pissed about it. I'm not upset about it. I don't need a reason, that kind of thing.
I've got a couple of leagues that I've held on to for the past couple of years because I felt guilty, and I'm not doing that anymore. I don't have the time to do that. So I'm with you. I'm going to do it the right way, but I got to cut bait.
Just to jump in on my own, I think most commissioners are probably in too many leagues. So it's almost like when you say to them, like, I'm in too many leagues, I got to quit. They're like, man, that's a great idea. I should probably look into that. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm going to do exactly
you're right. I should probably. There was actually one I was in last year that I told the commissioner that I wanted to get out. And he goes, you're the third person to tell me that. I don't really want to play either. I think we might just fold the league. And so we put it in the league chat.
They're not a better feeling than that?
Everybody 2 days later, everybody's like, yeah, that makes sense. You go. We're good. Yeah. But yeah, keep going, Jake. Keep going.
One thing I like to do at the end of every season, I started doing this a few years ago, and it's really helped. And it's both Dynasty and Redraft, is about a week after the season ends, the fantasy championship, I just go and I make a Word document and I just make notes on things that I learned that season. Because, in the off season, especially the preseason going into draft season, there's a lot of narrative. There's a lot of talk about, like, look at guys like Deebo Samuel. Like, he was going 4, 5, 6 rounds after Ayuk. Just some things that not only over the length of the season, but also how things finished up in the playoffs, just to give myself a reminder when I do go into that draft season, when I'm starting to prepare for the following season, that, okay, I remember I hit on these things that, there was one that I made myself laugh, and I still think of it a couple of years ago. I won the championship in my home league, and I wrote playoff matchups matter. And then I can't remember the specific player, but there was somebody who I was holding on for one matchup, and he helped me win the championship. And then the very next line, I wrote playoff matchups don't matter, because I had DeAndre Hopkins, and he had a fantastic matchup and didn't do anything. So it was just one of those things. I put those side by side to remind myself to not overthink things like that. Like, you play your stud, you try to look for the matchups, but in reality, you play your studs unless it's somebody who, on the fence that you want to play with a good matchup, something like that. But I definitely completely agree. Take a break. No matter how many leads you have. I like to just give myself a breather. Like, maybe it's because I have so many leagues. Maybe it's because I have kids. You got to take a step back and kind of have some time to absorb it all. Cause it's so easy to want to fall into that trap of, okay, well, I didn't win the league that I wanted to win, or as many leagues as I wanted to win. So what do? You do a dynasty startup. I want to start over and I want to build my team from scratch. And it's so easy to get caught up in that. But, and I'm more of the long game as well. I do scour the free agent market to see if there's anybody who who I do believe has some talent if they sign with in the right situation. But all in all, I'm not too active in the offseason until after free agency and after the rookie draft, just because I'm a little risk adverse when it comes to trading sometimes, and
So much
I
can
don't want to
change.
take the chance. Yeah, so much can change, and I don't want to take the chance of making that big move for somebody, and then they sign where they're going to have a backfield, or sign where they're going to be the number 2 wide receiver, 3 wide receiver when you think they're going to like. Leonard Fournette was a good example, although he played really well. Everybody was excited; they thought he was going to go somewhere and where he wasn't going to share the backfield. Granted, he did take over the backfield, but it didn't look like that when he signed back with Tampa. So he's somebody who stuck with me this past year. That everybody thinks he's going to sign in Miami or sign in Seattle and become this bell cow back, and you know people got lucky with him. I had my fair share of Leonard Fournette, but he's just an example of how what the narrative is on Twitter isn't necessarily what's going to happen. You've got to be really careful with that in the offseason and Dynasty.
Or Jay, you'll appreciate this. My boy James Robinson. Everyone was happy when we got through free agency and he was pretty much unscathed.
Yep.
And the draft
and
came.
I was
ETN.
Yep. And I will admit James Robinson is somebody who I mid-season I changed my mind on because he was getting that volume. I traded for him in my home league. He's helped me get to the playoffs. So Rocky,
way,
I will admit I was wrong on James Robinson.
If you're still alive and you have him, he's going to smash this week versus the Jets.
I sure hope so. Well, I'm starting AJ Brown.
You're like a historically bad run defense.
I sure hope so. Yeah. I'm going to need it. I'm going to need it this week. So,
well, I'll get back onto this for just a second. I think you hit on a lot of the new stuff that I was going to bring up too, Jay. And the thing that you hit on a lot that I think Rocky mentioned that I want to make sure I mention too. First things first, take a break, right? You can't do anything if you're mentally frazzled. You're not going to make good decisions if you're not in the right place. So I am right there with you. I almost always, and I don't say I take a break as in like I stop paying attention, but I stop sending trade offers. I stop really looking at the waivers for the entire postseason of the NFL. Right when the fantasy championships end, I am really just on like January pretty much. I am almost entirely leaving my teams just to go, because in all honesty, most leagues are dying by then, or slowing down by then. There's not really a lot of activity in the league anyway, and those are the times when you might send a couple trades, but no one's really looking to make a lot of moves right there. Because nothing is, nothing has changed enough. You know what I mean? You might get a guy that injures himself or comes out of nowhere in the postseason, but that's really rare. So again, I'm right there with you. Take a break, get your mind right, take some time off. I think one thing that
I was going to say that January time too is great just to watch football, to enjoy football. It's basically mostly good teams playing.
I was literally about to say
exactly what I was going to do. Yep. Because then you can watch the playoffs.
You have no fantasy concerns or playoff fantasy leagues, I guess. But it's nice sometimes to just watch football, just not be worrying. Okay, I can score here, but then I can't. Then this guy can't score anymore after this. Yeah.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Yep. Like, this is what it feels like to watch football without having to worry about fantasy leagues.
Well, and that's why I like about it too, because there's only 2 or 4, maybe 8 games, I think, in a week, right? Like well, not even 8, I guess. There's like 4 games or something on a weekend. I mean, like it's a lot lighter workload, and so that way you can kind of the NFL almost feels like they take a break, right? Half the league goes to bed and they just take their off season already, and it's like that's a perfect time to mentally relax, get back into liking football, watch the Super Bowl, have fun with all that, and then I'm not kidding you, like the day after the Super Bowl, like that Monday, I'm sending out trade offers. I'm going back to see what like picks I can get, because then it's like, all right, grind time. We got to keep going. And I talk about this a lot in articles that I write, and we talk about it on the show all the time. But it just feels to me, and maybe it's anecdotal, but I feel like the results are there. But the people who work the hardest get the most benefit out of this. The people that grind the waivers, the people that really do like try to squeeze every bit of value they can, and like all that kind of stuff. While it can be annoying and sometimes unnecessary, you can sometimes use that in your advantage, and that's when you start to make like really big like moves on your team and make the value of your team go up, right? Is in that February, March timeframe, in that free agency timeframe. And you said this too, Jay, like I'm all for being risky on a rebuild. I am all for being risky in the offseason where I need to be risky. And I talk about this a lot too. You got to have a little bit of risk on every team. You can't be a boring team and win. So if my teams are coming into the offseason and it's a bunch of boring players that really didn't do a lot for me this year, or I got bounced in the first round, I might be going out and acquiring risk. Like, let's go find me, I don't know, Kenny Galladay. Right? Let's go find some cheap, risky play. Juju Smith-Schuster. right? If he signs with Kansas City or he signs with Green Bay, or there's so many question marks around these guys. The current manager of them might have held them all year for this exact moment to hold and wait, but they might be willing to cut bait and say, you know what, I'm out of here. So it's like that's when you can start to strike on some of those riskier options, which I really like risk to a point, right? Like I am not risk averse, but I'm also not risk attractive, right? Like I'm not dying to go get it, but it's a nice balance. You kind of have to find that thread. That
It's all about the value, like you said. Like
always.
that's risk is worth it if as long as you're not overpaying for it.
Yep, like you might go out there and send like a second for Allen Robinson in every league just to see if anybody's biting, just to see if something pops. You know what I mean? Like maybe somebody out there is I don't know, fed up with Robinson and has no picks, and like Rocky was just saying, now's the time to go get picks. They might look at that and go, "Yeah, I'm off that train." And in your head, you're like, "That's a good trade." In his head, that's a good trade. That's what we're looking for, right? Because dynasty leagues, you're really not gonna do well in dynasty if you try to screw everybody over and win every trade. That's not how it works in dynasty. It just can't. So I liked all
Even
of that.
in
And I think one
redraft,
other.
I just want to jump in there real quick. That's something I really try to preach. I practice it and I preach it. People who try to win trade, there's nothing more annoying than somebody that feels like they have to win every trade.
Yeah.
I've had so much more success in dynasty and redraft with people that I have a good trade relationship with, that you're willing to, have the win-win deal, that even if you win one trade, well, that person's going to have a bad taste in their mouth and they're not going to want to trade with you anymore.
Exactly.
I definitely think it's much more productive to have good trade relationships with people in your leagues.
And especially this time of year, I'm willing to lose trades. I don't, I want points, and if I'm going to lose a trade on value because I get points to help me win a championship, I'm doing that all day.
Yep.
Well, and that's exactly right. But in the offseason, it kind of flips the other way a little bit. Where like I care more about value than points, right? So like I'm just trying to get anything value added to my team, but the values are different, right? My value is different than Rocky's values and different than Jay's values. So like you can find a way to one up and get some value on your team, and the other guy can agree. So that's something where it can kind of come into play. So I also wanted to say one last thing: watching the tape, watching the rookies. That's exactly right. That's what we need to start doing, and this is the time of year to start doing that. So I 100% agree. Leading up to the season, that's the time to go. So
one last thing I just wanted to point out before we move to the next question. Our buddy Kyle Sender in the chat, it said, one thing I'll say, this goes back a little bit with ways what we were talking about, but I wanted to point it out. If you leave a league and you've traded away your future picks, offer to pay the next buy-in if it's a money league. I thought that was it's not something I've ever really done, but I thought it was a really nice suggestion. Depending on how high the buy-in is, I don't know if I'll offer, but a lot of my leagues are lower buy-ins, and I just thought it was an interesting point.
I like that, and I think that really depends on, and it depends on the person too. Like if you went into the season knowing you were going to leave and then you traded those picks away, then yeah, you should do that. But if you legitimately didn't plan on it, you made moves to make the team better, then, I think it's a nice gesture, but it's not, necessarily something that you should.
Yeah. I don't think it's something you have to do. Yeah. But especially if it's not too high of a buy, and you're talking like a $40 league, $30 league, something like that, maybe. But
yeah, if it's a $500 league,
I'm not afraid to pay that buy.
No, that's a different ask. That's a different ask. So I think we hit on a lot of good topics there. I think we covered a lot of ground. I mean, that's a really meaty question. We'll be getting into all of that this offseason. Obviously, we'll talk about each one of these. We're still going to be weekly in the offseason where, Dynasty doesn't stop. We got to play this game all year round. So we'll make sure that we're with you and keep tuning in, obviously, if you want more questions. But I thought that was a good starter when they're from Pulsar. So thanks so much for that. We'll get into some more of that stuff, obviously, even in this show. There's a whole bunch of other things. But the next question comes to us from Dennis Bennett, FF Roundtable, @culture_coach. His is more of a start sit, which I like these in Dynasty. We don't do a lot of this on this show, but it's kind of an interesting angle to look at it. He's got PPR. He needs 2 for his flex spots. He's got Gabe Davis, Jamison Crowder, Kenny Galladay, or Allen Robinson if he's off the COVID list. So again, it mentioned some of the guys I just talked about there. But again, to repeat, Gabe Davis, Jamison Crowder, Kenny Galladay, Allen Robinson. Jay, pick 2 of those. Who are you starting?
Well, Gabe Davis jumps off the page to me. He's no question, without hesitation, the one that I am definitely throwing in my lineup. Even if Emmanuel Sanders comes back, even in the tough matchup, by all means, he's got the high. All these guys have a floor of 0. Let's be honest. He's got the highest ceiling by far. He just came off a huge game, first career 2-touchdown game. So he's in my lineup, no question. The other one I would go with is Jamison Crowder. He's got a good matchup going against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who give up the 6th most points to opposing wide receivers. Over the past three games, he's averaging over 6 targets a game. No Elijah Moore, no Corey Davis. He's pretty much the man there. And yes, Zach Wilson has looked like trash, but in a PPR format, you could easily see Crowder getting to the 10-point threshold. If he's able to sneak into the end zone, he could have a good game. There's no way I'm trusting either one of the two other guys. Kenny Golladay, only three games this season over double-digit points. He's got either Joe Judge is being sneaky and withholding if it's going to be Jake Fromm or Mike Glennon under center. We need that competitive edge with those two guys. But I can't trust a wide receiver has one of those guys under center. And then Allen Robinson, he's, in my opinion, the biggest bust in all of fantasy this year. 2 games over 10 points, only 1 touchdown in the season. You can't trust him.
No, that's a great point. That's a great point. Rocky, what about you? You on the same page?
Oh yeah, Jay nailed it. Gabe Davis is the easy call here of these 4 guys. Saw what he could do last week. Now that they play the same exact role, but Beasley is out, so they're down a receiver. Sanders looks like he might be back, but I think Gabe Davis is going to have a large role this week. And I don't love any of the other ones, but yeah, I would go with Crowder too. It's what they're playing Jacksonville, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, because I mentioned James Robinson versus the Jets. Yeah, so it's not a bad matchup. And Kenny Golladay and Allen Robinson have done nothing all year. And Crowder hasn't done much, but I'll take his 4 for 49 over what I might get from Kenny Golladay and Allen Robinson.
Yeah. He hasn't done much, but he's done more than those 2 guys. So that's not a hard bar to hurdle.
You just can't trust Golladay. You can't trust Robinson. I'm right there with you. So hopefully that question gets answered in time for that to make a difference. So next one we got here from Dave at the Prevalent One. What's the best way to handle non-playoff draft order? Is it max potential points, a doo-doo bowl, or overall head-to-head standings? Is it to tank or not to tank? I mean, what do we do with this? And I guess as a commissioner, I'm a commissioner. I know you guys are commissioners. Rocky, let's start with you. What's your way to handle the non-playoff draft order? How do you handle that in your leagues?
Oh, this is easy I am a strong proponent of potential points. For non-playoff draft order, I do it in all my leagues. I think it's a good anti-tanking measure because there's no reason to not start your best lineup. So it helps with that, and I just think it just gives the best overall view of a roster. And I know people will say, "Oh, but this crappy guy goes off and it messes up my potential points." Well, then get rid of that guy. Sell him to somebody when he goes off. If you don't want the points, get rid of him. Get rid of him for a 4th if it means that much to you that he went off one week. But I think overall it gives the best view of who has the worst roster. It also helps prevent tanking. I don't get the downside to it. I know some people don't like it, and mainly that's the argument I hear is, this guy goes off and that's the reason that I'm not getting the 102 or something. But meanwhile, 3 other guys went off on some other guy's roster, and now he's got the 103. Right. So it's just to me, it's easily the best way to do it. I hate actually toilet bowls, especially with the kind where you get rewarded a pick. I can't stand. You're devaluing everyone else, slightly devaluing everyone else's second by giving somebody the 113. I can't stand that. So I don't like that at all.
You know what I really don't like, and this is where it gets frustrating because there isn't one answer, and I guess that's kind of the issue, but there are somewhere it's like a consolation bracket where the winners advance, and then sometimes it's a toilet bowl where the losers advance, and so you want to lose, and am I supposed to win them? I don't know. They're all just brackets to me, and in all honesty, I just don't care. If I'm not in the playoffs, I really I'm done. I'm out. That's fine. But this goes back to what we talked about before with that's why I think there should be no trade deadlines, right? In theory, if I'm out of it and there is no toilet bowl, there is no consolation, none of that, let me at least trade with the guys that are, at least keep me interested in the league that way. But I mean, Rocky, unless you've got more to talk about, I mean, Jay, what was your idea? How do you like to handle those non-playoff teams?
So I completely agree. I think the fairest way, the best way to prevent tanking is max potential points. There's no argument there from me. Now, the only other idea I will say, if you want, maybe somebody could say that's boring. The other people want something to do during the playoffs. A toilet bowl, a losers bracket, whatever, but with a little bit of a twist. So yes, we do this my home league is an auction league. It's a keeper auction, so it's got some dynasty elements, but it's redraft. We like to keep the draft fresh and stuff, but we do what we call the Scrote Bowl, which is the losers playoff, and the teams that don't make the playoffs all go in, and then if you lose, you move on. But we have a punishment. So if you could do where you have a toilet bowl with a punishment that is like this year we're doing the Waffle House challenge. Whoever winds up the Scrote Bowl champion has to stay in Waffle House for 24 hours, and every waffle they eat, they lose an hour. But make it where it's something embarrassing. I don't like the whole monetary, you have to pay an extra fee or something like that, because sometimes it's just bad luck. Like, it's definitely skill, but sometimes you just have bad luck in a season. It happens. You have a bunch of guys who get injured this year with COVID. There's so many different things. So something that's, slightly embarrassing, something that everybody will do that, and it's to the point, honestly, in my home league, people are more worried about not being last place versus actually winning the championship. They don't want to,
like that. Yeah.
So you do it where you have the reverse results of the toilet bowl, and you have a punishment for whoever winds up in last place. So it's you still, if somebody's willing to tank and do the punishment just to get a better pick, there's only so much you can get. But it adds a little element of fun. It's not necessarily quite as fair as potential points, but it's another option.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with a toilet bowl. Yeah, where you're playing to avoid a punishment or something like that. I just don't like basing draft order or giving picks off of it.
I definitely don't like giving
picks.
$25
or something like that, just to make it. Yeah,
I don't like giving picks either.
I'll put this down. Like if there was let's say I could tank and get a better pick, and also get to eat all the waffles I wanted, I might do that. Like, that sounds amazing. Like, how is that punishment? Every time I hear about that, I'm like, man, I might do that tomorrow.
One of the guys who was in ours this year, that's the punishment for ours this year. He's got 3 kids. He's like, you know what? I might just lose just so I can go spend 24 hours in silence at Waffle House and not have to deal with my kids for 24 hours.
That part I like. Have you ever tried eating 12 waffles, 14 waffles?
I'm sure Andrew? It would be hell. I'm sure it would be hell, but I would just love to try it. You know what I mean? Like, I think back in college, I used to be able to do a lot more than I could now, right? As you get older, you learn these things. But
yes.
But I remember in college, we had like a pancake breakfast or something. And I think I ate 13 pancakes in like 5 hours. And everybody's like, how are you still eating? I'm like, I honestly don't know. So I feel like maybe I could channel that inner energy. But no, I love that idea. And I think to kind of bring it back to Dynasty for a second, I think the question that I thought was interesting here was, I like potential points. I know that there's some, like Rocky said, there's some ups and downs about that. But what we do in one of my leagues is the non-playoff teams is by standings at the end of the regular season. So like the standings are on whatever they are, right? It's like there's head to head, there's tiebreakers and points and all this, and that's whatever your league sets up. But after that, for the playoff teams, what we do is the winner obviously gets the 12th pick, but the 2nd through 6th picks are all based on most like points for. So like the head to head goes out the window, like your record goes out the window when you make the playoffs, because all too often that last team in the playoffs ends up becoming, could get really lucky and win it. So it's kind of like the champion is number 1, 2 through 5 is based on total points of who is in the playoffs. And then after that, it's standings. And that's kind of to appease everybody in the league. So the answer I'm going with is whatever your league wants is probably the right answer. And so I always say, and I think sometimes commissioners get upset or worried about this, but ask your league, right? Poll the league. What do they want to do? Right? Because a group of guys over here might want something entirely different than a group of guys over here. And so just find out what they want. I think if everybody's got buy-in, if everybody's got a vote and all this, like it could easily be something you vote on. It could easily be something you bring up in the offseason to say, hey, how should we do this next year? In these non-point scoring months, that's something you can bring up. I think that's worth talking about. I like the idea of potential points, but I like having a hybrid in some too, because it makes it kind of like, well, what are we playing for in this one?
Right.
Yeah, I generally don't like doing straight standings, just because there's so much luck in schedules and who you play when. But what I really hate is doing lotteries. That's another thing I wanted to mention. He didn't mention it in the question, but lotteries just screw the bad teams way too much to me. And I've seen way too many times where an awful team ends up with like the 104 because of a lottery, and it's ridiculous. So
even if you do like a weighted lottery, it doesn't pan out well. Like we're not the NBA. Come on.
And I just because we had a question in the chat from Ridley Truther, who's actually got our next question on the show sheet, I believe, as well. It's do you guys see Amon-Ra St. Brown being the real deal, Goff's Detroit version of Bobby Trees? I don't know about the Goff part because I don't know if Goff's going to be there after 3 weeks from now. But what do you guys think?
Well, I'll start with this. I liked ARSB as I've shortened his name down every time because I just got sick of it. But I like St. Brown a lot. I really do think that he's got some potential. I got him a lot in second and third rounds last season and kind of held on to him through the rocky start. And everybody was kind of worried if he was going to be a guy, and who knows what Goff's going to do. I don't know if I'm agreeing with you, Rocky. I don't know if he's really Bobby Trees worthy yet. I'm not willing to put that title on him. If Goff sticks around, or if Goff gets better, or if that team adds some other pieces that makes them better, and ARSB can be the number one receiver, sure. But I'm not sure he's a number one receiver. I don't doubt the talent. I just don't know if he's got the body type to really be the number one alpha on a team. I think they're going to have to find somebody either in this draft or in the free agency, kind of like what the Giants did with Kenny Galladay, like going out and finding somebody. So I'm not sure exactly, but I don't mind holding on to ARSB for sure. I think he's somebody that right now is hot. And there's no reason to sell him yet. I think it can only go up. But what do you think, Jay? Are you on the ARSB train?
I'm similar to you. I like the talent. I definitely don't think he is an alpha wide receiver. I want to see him do this with both DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson on the field. His production here recently has been volume based. He's looked good, but he's pretty much all they have. So I think in Dynasty, he's
Josh Reynolds slander.
Yeah, that's
or even Hawkinson slander. I mean, like Hawkinson's there, but he's injured now. But
right.
I'm just saying, like he's there. You know what I mean? He's not going away next year.
I think Jay's saying though he's ticked up since both Swift and
right. Exactly. I want to see it with all of those guys on the field together, and him still be putting up these type of numbers.
Yeah. So sorry, that's fair.
Do it without necessarily the volume that he's been getting. I think he can be in production wise similar to a Sterling Shepard when he gets healthy. Sterling Shepard is not a alpha wide receiver, but he's put up solid wide receiver production from a fantasy perspective because he plays that, in the middle of the field. It's in more so in PPR leagues. So I think if they are able to get a number one wide receiver, like you said, I think he can be productive, not necessarily somebody who's going to, win a league for you, but you need those pieces that can put up solid numbers.
For sure.
Yeah, I think I got nothing to add. I think you guys pretty much summed it up. He's not a number one. I see him being, when Detroit eventually gets a more of a wide receiver one in there, he'll probably in fantasy, I think, maybe be a low end 2, high end 3 kind of guy at best. So yeah, I'm on board with you too.
Oh, he's a great flex play. He's somebody you hold on to and hope he rises in value, and you can trade for somebody who's dipped. That's usually how you look at that, or package together with someone else as the next season opens. So with that being Ridley Truther's question, let's get his second question, the one that he replied to the tweet. Again, at Ridley Truther, at CWC Wood 1. This is a great one, and I really am curious to hear your opinion more than anyone's on this one, Rocky, because it involves the Philly players. Has Goddard overtaken Waller in Dynasty? Also, what would be your ideal landing spot for Gallup? And then he says Philly, cross fingers. Like, please be Philly. And then A-Rob and Godwin, obviously. Like, we don't know where we're going with those guys either. So let's start with the first one. Has Goddard overtaken Waller in Dynasty for you, Rocky?
I think he has. We were talking about this on Trade Addicts this past week. I mean, Waller is clearly no longer in that elite tier. Like we would lump him with Kelsey and Kittle for these last couple of years, and even before the injury, he was not performing that way. He was having he was better than most tight ends, but he was kind of in that Goddard tier anyway. He was giving you 16 some weeks. Some weeks he'd only have like 8 or 9 points. And he's only getting older. I think Goddard is I don't ever see Goddard getting into that tier that we talked about Waller being in. But he's basically at least as good as Waller right now, and you're getting a bunch of years on top of it. So I think he looks great really too since ever since Ertz left. It's funny around here. I mean, he's great after the catch. Around here we would always joke about Zach Ertz basically catches the ball and falls down. And he's the exact opposite. They set up a lot of tight end screens for him for that very reason, because he is so good running with the ball. So I think he's going to score a lot of points. Even if they get another receiver or somebody, because they really do need somebody else. It's basically just Smith and Goddard, and that's it. So Even if that happens, I still think he's going to get a decent amount of production. So, yeah, I would put Goddard above Waller at this point. And I'm a guy who's not. I'm generally more pessimistic on Eagles guys, and I haven't been as high on Goddard maybe, but I just the years, and I see equal production going forward.
So I think it sounds like, and maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but it sounds like you're more low on Waller than high on Goddard. Is that
It
a fair way to
is,
put it?
yeah. They're both, yeah. To me now, they're both in that tier of guys that you like. You feel comfortable starting them, but you're not expecting a difference maker week after week, and that's both of them. And I'll take the younger one.
Makes sense. Jay, are you on that same page, or you got a different opinion?
It's like Rocky's looking at my notes because it's literally pretty much everything exactly the way I was going to say it. It's more of Waller has taken a step back. Goddard's taken, a step up with Ertz out of town. You've got those extra 3 years. Can Waller, get back to that elite production? Sure, but we don't know if Carr is going to be in Las Vegas next year. So we don't know who's going to be the quarterback under center. That could change. Waller's always been, he's talented, but it's always been volume because Carr has just peppered him with targets. So I think they're pretty much in the same tier of player. And give me the guy who's 3 years younger, like Rocky said.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it comes down to for me too. It's tier wise, right? I don't know. I don't know if I would say I would take Goddard over Waller. I'm not sure if he's leapfrogged Waller, but if you're telling me their value's the same, I'd probably rather have Waller in a straight up trade. I'm not sure that trade gets done, but I'd probably still rather have Waller, even though he's older. Tight ends last longer. He's obviously shown he can blow up like that. Goddard's still got some working out to do. And as we always joke about it, Rocky, is Hurts going to be there next year? Like all these questions, right? Like there's a lot of question marks around Goddard too. They've got Smith. That offense kind of needs a big retool. Like they got rid of Ertz, but Goddard hasn't been dominant that much. I mean, he's had a couple good weeks here and there, but I don't know. I just feel like they're both in that question mark tier. So I agree with the logic, but if you're telling me, gun to my head, which one would you rather have? It's probably still Waller for now.
You know what's funny? I actually offered Russ Dynasty Outhouse trade in I think in one of the trade addicts leads of before this question came up of Waller for Goddard, and I think I was actually looking for points, so there is some more context to it. But he did not take it. He's out of the playoffs, so Waller is the older guy, but I still think he has multiple years left, and he preferred Goddard and I guess the youth over Waller. So I just thought that was interesting. There was I actually made an offer and it got turned down.
Well, and I'm not saying, again, not in my league, right? Like I'm not saying it goes like that everywhere, but I'm saying, at the couple of places I've got Goddard, I might send an offer for Waller and see if the other, if the other guy agrees with you. I don't think you're wrong by any stretch. I'm not saying I disagree. It's more like, man, I kind of lean Waller, but I get the logic. You know what I mean? Like, especially in some leagues, if you're 1 year away from contending still, and I mean like 2023 before you're really ready to contend, Goddard makes total sense.
Right.
But if your team is like, you've got Gronk and he might retire at any minute, you know what I mean? Like maybe it makes more sense to have, somebody else that can be a little stronger, but even then is Waller stronger? So I thought that was a great question, at least for some discussion. I'm still technically, I would put like Waller at 6, Goddard at 7, something like that, where it's like they're right there. You know what I mean? Like that's getting really close. So let's get into his second question here. Then is what would be your ideal landing spot? And I'll start with each of these one at a time. Jay, where do you think Gallup fits in best? Where would be his ideal landing spot for fantasy? Let's kind of keep it in that realm.
I would like to see him in Kansas City. I think the Chiefs secondary wide receiver compared a lot to the Green Bay situation that you don't want to touch whoever the second wide receiver in Kansas City is, whether it's, some weeks Pringle steps up, some weeks it's Hardman. You never know because it's, everything goes through Kelsey and everything goes through Hill. Well, the offenses look better as of late, but teams have been able to slow down this offense. I would think that if you get a guy like Gallup, Hardman's fine, Pringle's fine, but none of these guys are, the talent level that Gallup is. I could see him putting up some really solid numbers from a fantasy perspective in Kansas City.
I like that. Yeah, Gallup's the prime number 2 receiver, and Kansas City's been missing that, right? They've been looking for it. They took Hardman to replace Tyreek when that was, question marks and all that, but it never really panned out. And I don't think Hardman's a real solid number 2, so that's a good fit. Rocky, what do you think about it? Is Philly a good landing spot for Gallup? Do you think that makes sense given the way that team's going and your love of Goddard, apparently?
I don't hate it, but that wasn't my first thought. I'm actually going to put one of these other guys in Philly though, but the place I had for Gallup was is kind of a similar thought, I think, sort of to Jay's, was to put him in LA with the Chargers. Across from Keenan Allen. Mike Williams is probably leaving, I'm thinking, at this point. And, he's going to be tied to Herbert. He can get, you got Keenan doing all the possession work, doing the underneath work along with Eckler. You can send Gallup deep. I kind of like that fit for him. And he doesn't have to be, I don't think Gallup's a number one, anywhere. No. So that fits perfectly into that situation.
Well, and I'll piggyback on this. I think we're all on the same page. He's a great number 2. Nobody's putting him as a number 1, but I'd like to see him go to Green Bay if Aaron Rodgers stays. I feel like if Aaron Rodgers stays there, you got Devontae Adams on one side and Gallup on the other, or in the slot. I feel like Gallup could really do well with a stud number 1 receiver like he's had in Dallas and not have a lot of attention on him. So I'm kind of on the same page as I think we all are. I think Gallup's probably, and this is going to sound weird, Gallup's probably my favorite guy to see where he goes of these 3. A-Rob, I love Allen Robinson, and I love Godwin, and we'll get into him in a second. But Allen Robinson, what an enigma, right? He was a QB proof. No matter what, he was always dominant. And they get a good quarterback. And nothing. Like, it just fell off. So, Rocky, where do you think Allen Robinson goes? Does he stay in Chicago? Where would you like to see him?
He's not staying in Chicago. I can guarantee
Just
you
checking.
that.
Just checking.
Mentally, he left Chicago at the beginning of the season.
Yes.
Yep.
So I would Robinson is the guy I would like to see end up in Philly. Actually, we need another receiver. It might not. I don't know if it's the best spot for his fantasy value, but I think it would make some sense. They need somebody else. You can maybe take Devontae. I mean, this doesn't help for him for fantasy, but he could take Devontae Smith under his wing. They kind of need a veteran wide receiver here. Another guy that hurts, and I do think it will be Hurts next year, Andrew. He had probably his best game of the season this past week, just sort of solidifying that. And another guy he can depend on, because I think that's, if you watch Eagles games, it's basically almost everything is to Goddard, Smith, or running back. So, because he can't depend on anybody else. So, I don't know that Allen Robinson's value is going to go up super high, or even his production is going to go up. It's going to go, I think, up from this year, but going to go up back to previous levels. So I think it would be a good spot for him. They've actually been a pretty good offense. I think that would not be a bad spot for fantasy, but I think especially for real life.
I like that. Jay, are you on the same page, or you got a different team in mind?
I have a different team, but a similar situation with Rocky's former quarterback. I think I could see him fitting in Indianapolis with the Colts. T.Y. Hilton just isn't what he used to be, just can't stay healthy. Similar to taking Devonta Smith under his wing. I could see him taking Michael Pittman under his wing. They could use another wide receiver on the opposite side of him. I could see it being a team that he would go to because Indianapolis is good. I think Wentz has done a really good job there. They got a great defense. They've got one of the best running backs in the league. Great young receiver. I think that, with a guy like Allen Robinson, they could really make a deep playoff run.
Well, I like that a lot. Yeah, I like that a lot. Mine is similar but different, and this is going to sound a little strange. And this is maybe the biggest one of the 3. I think some strange way Russell Wilson finds his way into the New York Giants offense, and Allen Robinson goes with him. And Jay, I know G-Men is in your handle. I'm guessing you're a Giants fan. Yes, yeah. What would you think about a Russell Wilson, Allen Robinson combo, getting rid of the Galladay, Daniel, I'm blanking on his name. It doesn't even
Daniel
matter
Jones?
what his name is.
It doesn't.
Jackson,
you don't even have to remember.
I think Galladay is going to be there, though.
Well, and that's we're going to get into Galladay in a second. But what do you think about that? If Galladay and Jones both leave and you get Russell Wilson and Allen Robinson, how happy would that make you?
Well, if Daniel Jones leaves, I'll be very happy. Like that, you can start there. And I'm a Duke fan too. He played for Duke in football. Yep. I've got this weird feeling that Russell Wilson is going to wind up with the Giants too, and it's not me. I think Rocky knows me well enough that I'm not, an over the top, homer when it comes to my takes and stuff like that. It's rumored that he's want to be there before. I think he wants to be in the New York market. Will I like it? Yes, but I don't feel like we're close enough to compete for a Super Bowl that it makes sense long-term for the team. The defense really took a step back this year. 2 years ago, we were a top 10 defense. I'm worried about Barkley ever getting back to where he it was his first 2 years. I think these injuries are really starting to pile up and take away some of his explosiveness. Granted, I think this next season is really going to be a big one for Barkley if he's able to, I don't think he's healthy right now. He doesn't look it. He does not. Booker looks better than him. He looks more explosive than Barkley. Now
Makes me sad.
I know it really does because he doesn't deserve it. But all things considered, just would I be much happier seeing Russell Wilson and Allen Robinson versus Kenny Golladay and Daniel Jones? Absolutely. Do I think it's the best?
It would be a blockbuster. Like, it would be huge. Like,
Right.
that would be a monstrous thing. I don't, and again, that's a 2% chance of happening. I mean,
Right,
I'm putting
right.
a lot of it out in the world,
Right.
but I've kind of come around recently to Russell Wilson, to the Giants too. I just feel like that kind of fits given his mentality. I think that team needs to do something strange in this last year or two of Gettleman, because if they don't,
Hopefully,
he might
I
not be there.
pray Gettleman
Well,
is gone.
and I'm just
Sierra
saying-
wants to be in New York too.
What's
Well,
that?
good point.
Maybe Sierra
Ciara.
wants to be
Yeah.
in New York. Yeah.
Yep.
Sierra.
But-
Sorry.
But no, that's fine. Just like, but that's kind of where my head went with Allen Robinson. I mean, that would be ideal. That would be crazy. Like, that would be, oh my God. Now, ideal is different than realistic to me. So in my head, like, ideal is like, that'd be crazy awesome. But
Yeah.
let's get into the third one, because I think there's a lot of meat left on this bone too. Is Godwin? Rocky, where do you think Godwin makes the most sense? Where would you like to see him go?
I'm going to be probably kind of cheating here because I think Godwin makes the most sense going back to Tampa Bay.
That was my answer.
That too was my initial answer. So I did
Yes.
put something else down, but that was my initial answer too. So
Yeah, just because of the injury, it gives him a chance to rehab his value going into free agency. I think the best thing for him to do is sign a 1-year contract. I think Brady's back. Almost, I think even if they win the Super Bowl, he's probably back. But
I agree. Yep.
yeah, I think he wants to play at least one more year. So he gets to play with Brady another year. Brady, loves peppering him. He was getting tons of receptions with Brady, especially once Brown was out. And who knows if Brown will be back next year or not? Maybe he will. But even when Brown was there, it's not like Godwin was bad. So I think he can kind of do his best work rehabbing his value, take a 1-year deal, and then get back on the market and make the big money then.
So I'll jump on this real quick and just say I had the same answer, because I think that it makes the most sense, and I'd like to see it the most. I think Godwin did really well with Brady. I think there was a lot of love from the team and everything like that. I just feel like, again, it is kind of cheating. I love it, but at the same time, I'm right there with you, Rocky. I think that makes the most sense for the long term. Jay, you said you had that, but you had a different answer. I've got a backup too. I'm curious if your second answer is my backup. So I'm just tossing it to you. What do you think? Where does Godwin
So
go?
my second one, it's actually a division rival. I could see him go into the Washington football team. Terry
Ooh.
McLaurin needs, he's immensely talented, but he's got to have somebody else. I thought Curtis Samuel was going to be that guy. He has not been. Granted, they've had to Taylor Heineke under center, Garrett Gilbert this week. I think I think Washington is going to make some big moves this offseason. They've got, their front seven is phenomenal, especially their front four. The defense, I think, is, you put just a decently productive offense on that team, and they could win a Super Bowl. It reminds me a lot of the Giants teams that won in the mid 2000s. Those offenses weren't phenomenal, but the defense was, and the offense was just good enough. So, they've been rumored to be in on, Deshaun Watson. Do they draft a quarterback? Fitzpatrick, maybe he comes back. You put a solid quarterback. You have Terry McLaurin, you have Chris Godwin, Logan Thomas, Antonio Gibson in the backfield. That's a pretty solid offense.
Yeah, no, that's got some firepower. That's got some of those, the kind of the feel of, oh, that's like a super team almost. I mean, that's coming
Right.
together. You got Gibson, obviously can be, pass catches or catch passes and all that. You got McKissick probably still there. I think he signs one more. You got Ricky Seals-Jones. I mean, that team is, I would almost say they're 1 or 2 pieces away, and Godwin's a good piece. So I don't mind that. I was surprised that I didn't have that team, actually, because that makes a lot of sense. But mine actually goes into our next question a little bit. But I think that Godwin would be an interesting fit in New Orleans in the Tampa Bay's division. I think New Orleans is kind of a team in a tailspin right now. I think that they don't know where they're going to go. They don't know what they're going to be. They don't know who's going to be in charge. They don't have a clue what's going on. And I think that Godwin is the kind of player that can come in and settle a team down. He's got enough cachet at this point. He's played enough. He's done enough. Sure, he's been injured and he's getting older and all this, but I think he could go in there and settle that team down. And our next question, and this is kind of why I wanted to get into this, comes from Edmund Dantes at Edmund D433-24055. Thanks for the question, Edmund. But his question is, what are we doing with Michael Thomas? And this is kind of what I'm getting into. Like, if Godwin goes to New Orleans, what are we doing with Michael Thomas? Well, in general, what are we doing with Michael Thomas? Right. So we don't have to use this as a, like, if Godwin goes there, let's play it all out. I'm just saying in general, that team needs some help. And I think if Godwin goes there, that helps. Thomas comes back, that helps. Does he come back? I guess, Jay, we'll bounce it back to you. I mean, in general, in Dynasty, what are you doing with Michael Thomas right now? Like, what, is he someone you're buying? Is he selling? What are you thinking about this?
I think you have to hold, and I'd say more of a buy than a sell. The only conditions that I would sell Michael Thomas, and I don't think you're going to get it, if you could get solid wide receiver 2 value for him, and I don't think anybody right now with all the question marks is going to give that up. So I think you're better off. He's still got the talent. He's still young. Whether he winds up in New Orleans with Jameis Winston or, I think he's played his last down as a Saint. I think he winds up somewhere else.
I think so too.
There's too much bad blood there. But he's immensely talented. I think for what you're going to get for him now, you cannot trade him away. You're basically going to get peanuts. And it was 2 years ago, but he was the wide receiver 1 overall. And I don't think he's ever going to be that, but I definitely think he can still be a top 12 wide receiver in this league for fantasy purposes. So for me, he's a buy low or a hold.
I completely agree. And I think the thing we talk about a lot on this show, and I'm sure everybody talks about this, is that with running backs, opportunity matters more. With receivers, talent matters more. And again, I'm oversimplifying, but opportunity still matters. And if he's not on the field, if he doesn't have availability, it doesn't matter what his talent and level of playability is. Like, you got to still be able to play. And I worry about his mentality too, because he's gone through what I would consider one of the weirdest off seasons where he didn't get the surgery, or he did, we don't know, and then he didn't, so now he's out again, and it was like, oh man, talk about frustrating. So for me, I'm right there with you though. I think he's a hold / buy. He's somebody that I might, I'm not going to send a bunch of lowball offers and start upsetting people in my leagues, but he's one of those people I might start opening a DM and just being like, hey man, what are you looking for Michael Thomas? Kind of testing the waters. If they come back and say something like, oh, it's got to be a late first, I'm out, right? Like, that's too rich. That's fine. I don't blame you. But if they come back and say, oh, I see you've got Curtis Samuel, give me Curtis Samuel in a third or Curtis Samuel in a second, I might be like, all right, I'm in on that. You know what I mean? Like, that's a pivot
absolutely.
for you, and it's a pivot for me. It gives you some youth and all this. Like, I'm not against that, right? So like, it could be, like you said it too, though, he could be a top 12 receiver. He could be never playing again, right? It's sort of like Calvin Ridley in a way, right? Speaking of Ridley Truther. I mean, there's a whole bunch of these guys now we're seeing. And again, I feel like it always comes back to that old adage we say in Dynasty, is that receivers hold value better until they don't. You know what I mean? Like, this is one of those weird cases where the number one receiver is off a cliff and is, wide receiver 30 or something now. But Rocky, what are your thoughts on Michael Thomas? What are you doing with him? Do you have him anywhere?
I have him. I think I only have him 1 or 2 leagues, crazily enough, with my 30+ leagues. And I'm a little different from you guys. I mean, I agree he's a hold, because you can't get anything for him right now. But for me, he's more of a hold / sell. I'm trying to move him the first value bump I can get. I don't think he's going to play for the Saints again. So my hope is he goes to a new team. People get a little excited about it, and then I can sell him. I'm basically kind of out on him. His value is never going to go up at this point. He's 28, 29, coming off 2 injured years. I mean, not considerably up. So I think the value bump he gets from going up to a new team is maybe the peak value he gets. And I'm not buying that the production is going to be there definitely not the way it was before, but I don't even know if we're going to get like 70% of what he was before. It could be half of what he was before. So I'm just not buying it. So I'd be looking to sell as soon as I can. Maybe that's not until he starts scoring points at the beginning of next year. But like I said, if people are maybe paying like late first value because he goes to Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers or something, I'd be willing to sell.
Yeah, and I think you're hitting on something there. Like, I'm not selling for peanuts, But if the value is right, it makes sense. But what is the thing we
Right.
always talk about on the show? Timing is everything.
Yep.
Now is not the time to sell Michael Thomas, right?
Nope.
And actually, the time to sell Michael Thomas might have been before the season when there was some speculation, maybe week 5 when we thought he was coming back week 7. But as soon as he was out for the year, you just can't sell him. You can't. There's no reason. There's no benefit to doing that. Honestly, it doesn't even take him playing again to see the value go up, though. His value could bump from a blurb. His value could bump from a free agency signing.
Right.
His value could bump from the team signing Deshaun Watson. You know what I mean? Like it could be a couple of things could happen to make his value go up in the offseason. So I don't want to make it sound like his value will never go up. Although you're probably right. It's never going back to wide receiver 1. I don't think that's even a question. That's for sure. But I think he still has top 12 receiver potential, and maybe not top 12 dynasty receiver, but top 12 production receiver. And I think that that's worth something. And I think if you hold on to him now and weather the storm, you might be rewarded. You might not. But again, if you paid a high price for him and held on to him for 3 years and rode that wave, you got some good years out of him. So you really can't be, all the way upset about it.
And that production thing is where I differ. I just don't think he has top 12 wide receivers. I don't think he's going to. I think he's like the best comparison I can think of is like latter day OBJ. Like on the Rams here, he's got some value again, production wise, that maybe he didn't have in Cleveland. But it's still not wide receiver 1 value.
Well, he's like Antonio Brown to me. He's one of those guys that's like stud potential and then fell off and went to a different team and is a wide receiver 3. That's probably what he's likely going to be, in all honesty. But I think he's got the talent. Like Antonio Brown, I think still has the talent, except for he froze his feet, so the poor guy can't run well. But I mean, like he's got that kind of level of talent. OBJ, I always kind of wonder, was he just a one-handed monster? Like was he just that one catch wonder? You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I wasn't, I'm not going to get down the rabbit hole with you, Jay. I'm sure.
I am and I'm not. But it's funny you mentioned OBJ because when we were talking, you mentioned earlier about wide receivers hold their value in Dynasty a lot longer. Well, I remember it wasn't too long ago when OBJ was the 101 overall in Dynasty leagues. And he fell off pretty quick too.
I feel like.
Yeah. So that doesn't hold. It's true until it's not, like you guys were saying. So I'm with you. I too, when he was with the Giants those first few years, I'm like, wow, is this guy really a Hall of Famer? And then I don't know about that.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. All right. Well, we'll get into our last listener question before we get to find me a trade. This one I think was another good kind of deep question, and it may not have an easy answer. I don't have specifics for it. I've got a couple guys I want to talk about, but this is from Ryan at RyanPros_FF. Which player do you think is going to increase their 2022 ADP the most in these final 2 weeks? So this is not necessarily saying which player is going to be the strongest between now and next year, which again, there a lot of players could increase their value, but he's saying specifically in these final 2 weeks. I took this question to be like, who should we be looking at in these last 2 weeks that maybe has the biggest delta in their value left? And Rocky, I guess I'll start with you. Do you have anybody specific that came to mind for this question that you think in these last 2 weeks of the regular season or the fantasy season has a chance to really do a number on their ADP in a positive way for next year?
Yeah, I did come up with one, although I think the best answer might be nobody because I'm not sure how much anyone's going to change over 2 weeks. But the guy I came up with was Christian Kirk. With Hopkins out, we saw him go 9 for 94 and a touchdown last week. He's got the Colts and the Cowboys coming up. Neither one's a bad defense, but they're not someone you're scared of. I definitely think he could produce in both of those matchups. I kind of especially like the Cardinals offense this coming week after Kyler kind of crapped the bed against the Lions of all teams. And also kind of tying into the question, I mean, it's kind of extending beyond 2 weeks in a way, but he's also going to be a free agent in the offseason. So that could also help his ADP rise even further. So he was the guy that came to mind for me.
That's not a bad one. What about you, Jay?
I'm going to go with Justin Fields for a couple of different reasons. He's had an up and down season, but he's started to play better as of late. And they're definitely trying to get his confidence up. You can see with that last meaningless drive that may have cost some people some championships on Monday night where there was, they weren't going to win the game, but they were basically playing like they were trying to win the game on the last Hail Mary play. They got him a touchdown with literally 1 second left on the clock. So I think they're going to do everything in their power to make him comfortable, to give him confidence. And the two matchups are, I think it's similar. They're not, cakewalk matchups. He plays the Seahawks and the Giants, who haven't given up a ton to quarterbacks, but they're not defenses that you're afraid of either. So I think that with Chicago wanting to get him more comfortable with solid matchups, I could see Justin Fields showing some flashes of why there were so many people that were so high on him coming into the season, especially with, Matt Nagy. A lot of people don't think he's going to be back. I don't think he's going to be back either. If they are able to get somebody to replace Allen Robinson, I could see Justin Fields closing out the season strong.
I like that one, and that's kind of similar to my answer, really, which is the one that popped in my mind the most was Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor Lawrence has had a really rocky year. I think it's been all over the place, and obviously a lot of that is Urban Meyer related. And now that Urban Meyer is gone, obviously the stink of that is going to take some time to fall away. But I think that the Jags aren't necessarily giving up, right? Darrell Bevell, I think, is their coach heading now and heading into the end of the season. They got the Jets this week, like we talked about earlier. I mean, like that's a pretty good matchup. I think he could do well. He closes out the season with the Patriots and the Colts, which are very, very stout defenses. But I think these last couple of weeks, we're going to see what Trevor Lawrence's life is like without Urban. And I think, especially against the Jets, I think he could have a good game and boost his value a little bit back to where it was. Which I think Trevor might be one of those guys that I'm not calling him a bust, not quite like a Zach Wilson type. I know Rocky's not a huge fan of Wilson either, but Wilson hasn't exactly been great, and I don't think he's going to be great. But I think Lawrence is going to be great. And I think that we haven't quite seen all of his potential. And so I think these last couple of weeks, as more and more people start to realize, oh, maybe that was Urban, or maybe that was the play calling, or maybe that was behind the scenes drama and maybe there's some other stuff that the cobwebs will clear. And finally, Trevor Lawrence will be the Andrew Luck that we've all been expecting, right? Like the kind of guy that comes out and actually does dominate. So I think if you're just specifically looking over these last couple of weeks of where football on the field matters, I think Trevor Lawrence has a good chance to do that. There are literally dozens of players that are going to have their value go up, and it's impossible to predict who it's going to be. But if you're just specifically talking about play on the field, I think Trevor Lawrence has a good chance. I like Fields too. I think that's a good pick.
Yep.
Same kind of reason. Like you're going to have some of these guys that just start to show a little bit as they go into the next season. So I like that. So go ahead.
I'm just going to say, I hope you're right, Andrew, because my belief in Lawrence is getting a little shaken. I mean, he didn't really produce against the Texans without Urban, which was
it was the first game. It was fired midweek. I mean, like I'm willing to give him a week, but the Jets, that's a get right game, my friend. Come on.
That's true. He's got one touchdown in the last 7 games, which is nuts, and he's got 5 single-digit games in the last 7 games.
So you can't go down much from here. It's kind of the other argument, right? Like he's almost at the 4.
It's just
can't get any worse.
A guy that's supposed to be this good could be, and I thought he was this good. Again, I watched Trevor Lawrence as well as Zach Wilson and all the other guys, and I just can't. I blamed it on Urban. I hope you're right. I hope it was as the first game and they're figuring things out, but I'm a little shaken.
Yeah, I'm crossing my fingers. So it's like I said, like, oh boy, like that's why I'm. Maybe
I hope
it's a
so
hopeful
for
question.
the love of my life, Laviska Shenault. Maybe he can start a little bit.
Yes, Jake is the definition of Visca truther.
Let's go Visca. All right. Well, I appreciate all those questions, everybody. Really, that was a lot of good discussion there. We got through a whole hour of those. I mean, we could talk for hours on Dynasty. That's what I love about this show. But we are going to head into our second and final segment of the night, which is a Find Me a Trade. We got a trade this week submitted by a fan of the show named Scott Sidlo. Am I saying that right? No, Scott, the third host.
He's a big fan of ours. I hear
the
he
third
listens
host
all the time. Yeah,
he's a good guy. He decided to help us out, and in these last weeks, what we try to do too is focus more on leagues that can have trades. There's a lot of leagues out there that have trade deadlines, and there's a whole bunch of ins and outs, and it just gets kind of messy trying to put together a trade for someone when they can't even make a trade. So we got this one from Scott, our buddy Scott, which I think is perfectly named Lord Chicken McDicken, which is a terrific team name.
It's amazing.
It is.
I'll pull it up here on the screen, and Rocky, if you want to describe the settings and everything and go through his take, then I'll go through his team on the screen.
Okay, it's a 12-team PPR league. 1.75 tight end premium, so pretty hefty premium. There are some long TD bonuses. It's a start 10, QB, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, tight end, 2 flex, and then the super flex spot. And I don't know the full size of the roster, but they're pretty big rosters. And it is, he said, in the ship last year, had Kamara's 6 TDs and lost. Legendary, I know. This year, bunch of question marks. I don't know what the F happened. So I guess he's trying to see where
I feel that same way in a lot of
from
leagues,
here.
so I get that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the hell happened either, but I wanted to bring this up. This is his team. He's actually, I think he's got a really good team, and I totally get his question marks here. But his quarterbacks, he's got Joe Burrow, Russell Wilson, Ben Roethlisberger, Jared Goff. I mean, there's 4 solid starters in my book. That's not bad in a super flex league. Happy with that. He's also got Nick Mullins, Trace McSorley. Who cares? His running backs, he's got Alvin Kamara, as you mentioned. Devin Singletary, he's got AJ Dillon, which I think has got a lot of future potential. Latavius Murray, Tony Pollard, a lot of future potential. Jamal Williams, pretty solid at running back. A couple other guys there. Receiver might be his weakest position. He's got your boy Visca, of course, but he's got Deontay Johnson, Tyreek Hill, Gabriel Davis, Preston Williams. I mean, it gets real low after that. So I mean, he's got a couple starters and then not much depth. He does have Calvin Ridley on IR, so that obviously hurt him. Tight end, he's got Jared Cook, Will Dissly, Jonnu Smith, a couple other guys. So, and then taxi, I think there's only a couple of people really worth mentioning, but Tyler Huntley, who's come on late, Ian Book, who's about to get a start, Darrington Evans, who could be something next year, who knows? Joshua Kelly maybe has some value to him. So a couple guys on taxi that could be something. But the point of this whole thing was obviously he's close. He's really close. He's one of those teams that you see every year and you're like, how did you not make the playoffs? How did this not happen? So again, he is out of the playoffs for this season, and it's kind of like, what do I do? Like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this now? I'll do my trade first just because I think it's the smallest of the 3. But obviously, if trades are still open, you're going to be able to maybe make a move to one of those playoff teams to help bolster their lineup through the last little push here. And my trade was to send Big Ben to the Empire for Sam Darnold or Zach Ertz. And the logic here, of course, Big Ben has very little value. We've talked about this ad nauseum. Who knows what his next season's going to be? He might retire. His arm might fall off. But he's scoring points. And if you're in the title game, points matter a lot, right? If you're looking at the lineup this week and you're like, man, I don't have anybody. And I remember looking at, I'll pull up his roster real quick, the Empire, because I remember thinking he didn't have a lot of options. He was actually pretty lean at quarterback. His only starter is Dak Prescott, and after that, Taylor Heineke, who is okay, Mike Glennon, PJ Walker. I'm like, he's really shallow, right? And he's got Darnold on IR. He's got Fitzpatrick on IR. So what were you gonna say there, Rocky?
No, I was just saying, about the quarterbacks. Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like he could use a little quarterback bump, and obviously Darnold isn't great. You're not asking for the world here. But Darnold's younger. He could stay on Carolina, could go somewhere else. I think that obviously that's not a bad plan in my book to kind of bolster your your quarterback group heading into next year, and maybe you ship one of those other guys off for a receiver or something around pick time, or draft pick time. The other thing with Zach Ertz, I just feel like, man, this guy's got Zach Ertz, his number 1 tight end, so he might not want to give him up. But I think Zach Ertz has got a long future in Arizona. I just think that the Cardinals need somebody like him. I think he fits really well with that offense. Kyler loves that guy, and I think that there is some value there for the future. So I guess maybe, Rocky, what do you think of this? Am I on base here? Do you think Scott would do something like this?
I think you're on base in terms of the kind of trade, because I think we all kind of mentioned, I had a bigger trade in mind, but all 3 of us mentioned the idea of moving a quarterback to somebody because of having Ben and Huntley and guys that might have some value but aren't really gonna have much value for him. I don't think you could probably get the Ertz one done because that's basically that guy's best tight end and he's in the playoffs. So I don't think you can get that one done, but I don't mind the Darnold, excuse me, because I think Ben's. I don't know that Ben's ever playing another game after 2021. So
we don't know Darnold is either.
Right, but there's a better chance that Darnold, I think, plays another game or becomes Belly's battles for a starting job somewhere than I think that Big Ben does. So. I don't mind Darnold. I just think the Ertz one would be tough. And you can get anything for Ben. I think you're doing well for a guy that, again, may not play. You may not get any fantasy value from him after 2 weeks from now.
But that's my logic. Is now is the time to move him, right? Get this for whatever you can. Send him somewhere.
And I agree. That guy, I would rather start Ben than Heineke this week. So, and he does not have a third quarterback. So
right, and so even if you're looking at it's super flex, you don't have to start another quarterback, right? Well, he's also got Christian McCaffrey who's on IR. Right, he's got like I said, Fitzpatrick, he's got Carson, he's got Kenyon Drake. Like, he's had a lot of injuries this year. Like, this guy's in the title hunt. He's able to go for this. I don't know. I feel like Roethlisberger is better than some of those other wide receiver 5 type guys, you know? Jay, what do you think about that one? And then go into your trade if you would there too.
Yeah, I like it. I think it makes complete sense. Like you guys have said, if you can get a half-eaten ham sandwich for Big Ben at this point, you got to take it because, you know, he's probably playing his last couple of games. I think it makes sense. And I'm with Rocky. I think it would be, if you can get Ertz, do it, but I don't think you can. I think the Darnold for Ben makes a lot of sense because it gives him, you know, a starting quarterback, and, you know, giving up Darnold, you're not giving up much, but at least you're getting something that could potentially turn into some value. So I think it's a solid deal.
Trade.
Yeah, right.
Trade. Yours was a little bit bigger. I liked yours. Had a little bit more meat on the bone. What were you thinking?
Yeah, it's a similar situation, but going with Redbeard Racer. What's funny to me is the teams in a Superflex league, 3 out of the 4 teams that are still left in the playoffs don't have 2 startable quarterbacks, which is very interesting to see. Because
maybe you don't need to get elite quarterbacks in Superflex.
Yeah. Funny you say that. What I went with is let Redbeard Racer pick 2 out of Goff, Huntley, and Big Ben. Whatever 2 quarterbacks he wants out there, because all 3 of those guys are pretty much, you know, Goff's younger. I do think Goff will still be a starter somewhere in the near future. Huntley, I think, is going to stick it. You know, I think he's a free agent, but I don't see Baltimore letting him go anywhere because he's done so well as he stepped in for Lamar Jackson. But he's, out of these 3 guys, he's got the highest upside for this week. So if you're looking to play for, you know, making this type of move, you're trying to win now. So Huntley might be the guy. Goff has a question mark with COVID. Ben, you really don't know what he is at this point. So that's why I said let Redbeard pick of those 3. let of those 3 pick whatever 2 quarterbacks you want. Plus throw in Devin Singletary, somebody who's really turned it on as of late. You know, it's a startable piece. His running backs are okay. It's got some solid ones, Zeke, but he did lose Fournette. Has David Montgomery, but other than that, not really many startable pieces. And receive Robert Woods. You know, Robert Woods obviously isn't going to help this team win the championship this year. And I think that Scott's team isn't, like you said, isn't somebody that is in a full rebuild. It's just missing some pieces. And one of the biggest issues with this team is the wide receiver depth. Robert Woods it's not like, I think Redbeard would be willing to give him up because he's not like he's giving up somebody, you know, a 25-year-old stud wide receiver. Woods definitely has some productive years left, but, you know, he's more of the solid wide receiver 2 type, coming off injury, up there in age, that if you're willing to, you know, if you're really going for it this season, you've got to give up some value in order to make that championship push. So I think it's a deal that, like Rocky, you said, I think it's easily Robert Woods is the best player in this deal, but sometimes you have to be willing to take a little bit of a loss on a trade in order to win a championship.
Completely agree. Yeah, and I think that's the kind of trade, 2 quarterbacks and a running back for an injured receiver. Just on the face of it, it's almost like, well, of course I'll send you that injured receiver. Like, this helps me immensely. So you're right. Like, that's a production versus trade value kind of discussion perfectly. So Rocky, do you have any thoughts on that one before you dive into yours? But I love that trade. I'm high on Robert Woods, so I think that was terrific.
Yeah, I agree with Jay on the concept of it, that I'm not worried about giving up 2 of those guys or Singletary. Woods scares me a little bit is the only thing. I'm just not sure if he's, you know, at 30, will he get fully back? But I really like the idea.
I think he's only 28. If I look,
I think he's 29 this year.
Okay,
he'll be 20. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But
let me take a look. I looked at a couple ages, so I could easily be wrong too.
But yeah. So I mean, but he easily could be back as well. I'm not sure how
you are
tied
right.
in.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure how tied the Rams are to him either, so his situation could change. I know they did extend him a year or 2 ago, so I don't know if they can get out from that yet or not. But yeah, I love the concept of the trade, and like I said, all 3 of us mentioned the idea of moving, you know, some of these quarterbacks he has, because he's got quarterbacks that clearly have no value after this year. I said something similar as well. Maybe I shot too high. I was talking about moving Huntley to the Empire. I put on the sheet for whatever you can get. And I mentioned the possibility of Boyd or Gallup. That may be shooting too high. Maybe not Boyd. I think people.
I was gonna say I could see Boyd, Gallup, especially
Gallup's
with what we were talking about moving somewhere else. It depends, if
I
Huntley's
was
declared
thinking
the starter.
and Huntley coming off of last week. It looks like Lamar's going to be out again. Huntley had like 30 points, and
He was
in
wasn't he the QB1 last week?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah,
I
he had
mean,
multiple rushing touchdowns. It was
maybe
kind
you
of
throw
Lamar-esque.
Huntley and throw another small piece to make it Gallup.
Yeah, Huntley and Singletary.
Yeah, I was about to
There
say,
you go.
yeah.
You should do the same thing
Well-
you did, except for Gallup or Boyd instead of Woods, maybe something
This
like
is
that.
one of those. This is one of those where I would go in the group chat, in the league chat, wherever it is, as the Huntley manager, and just be like, "Man, Huntley's going to look great in Green Bay next year.
Yeah.
Huntley's going to look great in Houston next year." You start hyping up that he's a guy that could be starting next year. That I'm glad I got him off waivers. You start putting that out there, and kind of putting some chum in the water, and then you can kind of start to offer some different offers.
You could even say that, let's say Huntley's declared the starter, Lamar's out. Go to all three of the guys who need a quarterback. Be like, whoever gives me the best offer, he's yours. So throw a little bit of a bidding war in there, and if you get something, I don't think Huntley is ever really going to be a huge fantasy asset. I think it's going to be a similar situations like this. So I think you strike while the iron's hot. If somebody's willing to give you anything of value, you pretty much take it.
Yeah, and the kind of main trade I put on there was something bigger, and I don't know that this could get done after today specifically, because one of these guys' value probably shot up today. It would have been better maybe 2 days ago. But what it was I put on there was Alvin Kamara and Singletary for Hawk and Akers. I don't think Akers is playing this regular season, by the way, so it doesn't help the guy, but his value did go up after he got activated, designated to return off of IR. The reason this came about is I was thinking I think he needs a tight end. I think tight end is by far his worst position. I agree he needs wide receiver depth, but if Ridley plays again, I think he's fine as Tyreek, Deontay, and Calvin Ridley as his starters. And to me, wide receiver depth is kind of one of the easiest cheap pieces to pick up. So I wanted to get him at tight end in a 1.75. And the guy, this is Trades Are Us, is the team you'd be trading with. He has Waller and Gronk, who aren't young, but I think he can expect at least one of them to be playing next year. So that maybe makes Hawk a little more expendable. Obviously, as we all did, you kind of, in this scenario, you shoot for the playoff teams and try and get values off of them. And that's what we all did. And so he has Hawk on injured reserve that he can't start. Akers isn't starting for him. The reason I threw Akers in is because I was almost ready to do Kamara for Hawk straight up, but I thought I had my Hawk blinders on. So that maybe you needed a little add-on, but I couldn't find a little add-on. So I threw something on the Kamara side and tried to maybe try and get Akers. And I don't even like Akers that much coming off the Achilles. And perhaps in a
you weren't a big fan before the Achilles, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I actually, funny thing is I actually liked him coming out, but his value soared into the stratosphere, and that's what I didn't like. He got that Clyde Edwards-Helaire after the rookie draft bump, except he got it after his rookie season. Yeah. So and we also happened with Edwards-Helaire, and I liked Akers a lot coming out. I actually had him as my three. I actually had Taylor, Dobbins, and then Swift and Akers neck and neck, and I've since changed all those guys around except Taylor, but in that class. But anyway, so yeah, I just didn't think Kamara for Hawk you were getting quite enough back, and now you may be getting too much, so maybe do it. You're basically depending on A, that maybe he thinks about Akers like I do, and B, he's just so gaga for points that he's okay with doing something like that. And Singletary is coming off a good game, looks like the lead back now for Buffalo, possibly for these last few weeks heading into the playoffs. Again, I don't know if it gets done, but maybe it starts a conversation. I agree with you guys too that I think this is a team can compete next year, and I know Kamara, maybe doesn't help losing Kamara, but I think he's got all his picks. He can maybe fill in with running back. You have all season to figure out running back. I think it's harder to find a tight end of Hawk's level. I know he didn't hit what I said I thought he was going to be this year. I was kind of expecting he to get to that sort of Andrews level, what he's at now, and he didn't do that. But I still think that can be in the future. I mean, this is only Hawk's third season. He's only 24, 25 years old. And I think I just underestimated how bad the Detroit offense, how bad Goff would be, all that stuff. I think as that improves, we could see Hawk kind of do what Andrews is doing now. Once he gets a better quarterback, maybe gets another weapon to take a little attention off him, that kind of thing. So I want to get that tight end in the 1.75, and I'll figure out running back sometime during the non-point scoring season. Like I said, he has, I don't think he has any extra picks, but he does have all his picks. His first should be decently high, and this is the kind of team you could probably add a running back to, and it would really help. Like a lot of teams that are non-playoff teams, they're so bad it doesn't help to add a running back. So, but this one, I think it would. Like I said, his quarterbacks are nice, his starting wide receivers are nice, and slotting and Hawk at tight end, I think, could be really nice. My only concern is if it could get done, but like I said, maybe it starts the conversation.
I like the idea of adding Akers to Hawk, because I think that both of those guys aren't scoring points and Kamara is. And everybody remembers last year where, Kamara went nuts scoring those 6 touchdowns. Obviously, it didn't somehow translate to a championship for our buddy Scott here. But I think if you're looking at that and you've got Hawk and Akers and you're in the title game and you're in, the semifinals like we are right here, you might look at that and go, you know what? Both of those guys have a bunch of big question marks. Kamara scoring points. I could use those points right now to make a push. I'm sending those 2 guys for Akers, or for a Kamara. I mean, like, I'm sending Akers and Hawk. Like, if I'm there, if I have that, that's a fair trade straight up like that. If you want to do a counter and like offer a third back or Singletary, fine, have them. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not too worried about it. But like, if I'm the Hawk manager, I'm taking the points, because I think Kamara's got a lot of points left in that tank, at least for the next year or two. And so, again, you could argue that he's getting older and he's going to fall off the cliff and all this, but that's not going to happen between now and Sunday. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to score some points, and the next 2 weeks are all that matters. If you're this close, if you're of the last 4 to win a title, the championships mean everything.
Flags fly forever. You make that move, you win that championship. And like you said, it's not like you're getting a 2-game rental like you are with a move for Big Ben or something like that. Kamara's going to have value for the next couple of years. Is he going to be a running back 1? His value will probably fall off, but he's definitely still got plenty left in the tank.
And just the one other thing I wanted to mention with Akers, because I know specifically Scott is not an Akers guy either. He's less of an Akers guy than I am, I think. But my thinking too with that was, and that's why I didn't mention him when I said about running back, is because I figure Scott will move him during the offseason. Once we start seeing the videos, you don't have to keep him.
Get those hype videos in there on Twitter, the workouts.
We'll start seeing more running and workouts and Akers with the shirt off and all this stuff. So
I think that's why I say timing is everything. Because the timing with Akers right now is the best time to get him before he starts making those videos. I think too, and we always say this, if you're rebuilding, sell all your running backs, and if you're contending, buy them all. Well, I mean, come August, that's when people start looking at their lineups, and come August, you might look at that and say, Akers is actually a starting running back, and we've had some injuries, and he's coming off Achilles, but he's better than nothing. I mean, his value is almost definitely only going to go up in my mind. It may not go up a ton, but I think that's an ascending asset. Hawk, I think, might be at the lowest. You might see him too, like you just said it before. So it's almost like sending a win now declining asset for 2 future win ascending assets. Like, that's kind of where that makes it worth doing on both sides if you're trying to win. So I thought that was actually a really good trade, and I'm glad you were able to bring that up, because it's a big trade, but it's not. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a big trade, but it's not that big. Like, it's not as big as I've ever seen. So
right.
And it makes sense for both teams. I think that's the biggest thing. It's a fair trade that makes sense for both teams, helps both teams where they're at. I think that's a perfect scenario.
Exactly. All right. Well, I appreciate that. That was awesome, guys. We got through a whole nother show. Find me a trade for our buddy Scott. Hopefully he can take some advice from this. I do think we all agree that there is maybe 1 or 2 pieces missing, and this team has a lot of chance to contend. So Absolutely. If Hill stays healthy and the other players, Kamara, obviously, whether you keep him or not, there's a lot of potential. So appreciate you making some time. So I guess while we're signing off, before we get going too fast here, Jay, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and what you got going on here as we head into the offseason?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at GMenJ. I'm a part of the team over on Front Yard Fantasy. We've got a lot of stuff going on over there. The main thing is have the game show, which, Rocky, you've been on multiple times. Andrew, you're going to be on for the first time next week. Right. 2-1. So I'm not sure what you're playing, Andrew. I'll have to take a look at the schedule. But have the game show Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Do not have a show tomorrow. That's one few times that we're actually not on, but most days, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern. And it's kind of a Tonight Show feel. It's, we have people from around the community, analysts, sometimes fans and stuff like that, and just play some games, talk fantasy. The analysis is first, but the fun is a very close second behind. We also have a show, 2 shows on FanDuel. Both Friday night, we do the game show, similar to what we do Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then a show on Sundays, a recap show, which we're going to continue. It's going to be a little different, obviously not a recap show, but we're going to continue it through the offseason on FanDuel at 7 p.m. Eastern, and do a lot of short form content. Got a great group of guys over there. We like to have a lot of fun. We love our fantasy. And the main thing is, just like you said, like to have fun with it.
No, it's awesome. I'm looking forward to being on there. I'm not prepping at all. Just to let you know now, I'm just going to go in blind. We'll see how it goes.
That's basically none of the guys prepare for anything either. So you'll fit.
I feel like that's my best chance. That's my best
absolutely.
chance. So no, really great having you on, Jay. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah,
I know we had
thank you
John
so
Luke
much.
on a couple of weeks ago, so it's good to get some of you front yard fantasy guys on here. So obviously, feel free to follow all of us if you're listening to this. You're a fan of us. Follow us on Twitter at Dynasty Junkies. I am Andrew Hall at Andrew Hall FF. Rocky at Dynasty FF Addict. We got Scott at Scott_Sidlo, of course. Give us all a follow. Obviously, still, you want to follow the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, the DAP Network, if you will, and we do. But that's the at DAP_network, where you can catch us live every Thursday. There's a bunch of great shows on there. The Fantasy Timeline, you got Get Real, and obviously the Trade Addicts Podcast, too. So make sure you get us all out there. Find everybody. Get us all on Twitter. We always love being a part of the conversation. Subscribe, rate, and review to the podcast. Send us feedback. If you have comments or questions, you want to put a review, that's fine, too. Anything else you want to add, Rocky, before we call it a night here?
No, I think that was pretty much it. I guess just, and I don't get to do this very often, but
that's right. Your turn. Take us out of here.
I want to say Merry Christmas and Junkies out.